Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. It was a quiet Tuesday morning, the kind that begins with a blanket of gray clouds and a soft drizzle. The kind of weather that makes you want to stay in bed, curled up with a warm cup of tea and a good book. I was 52, living alone in a small, cozy house on Maplewood Lane, a street where everyone greeted each other, but never truly knew one another. We exchanged pleasantries, waved in passing, and occasionally borrowed a cup of sugar, but that was the extent of our interactions. Life was simple, familiar, and, if I'm being honest, a little lonely. That morning, I sat at my kitchen table, gazing out the window at my rain-soaked garden. The hydrangeas were in full bloom, their delicate blue petals weighed down by droplets of water. The old oak tree in my backyard swayed gently in the breeze. Lost in thought, I sipped my chamomile tea, letting the warmth soothe me, when suddenly a knock at the door interrupted my solitude. I wasn't expecting visitors. My son David was busy with his life in the city, and my friends were occupied with their own families and jobs. I hesitated for a moment before setting down my cup and walking to the door. When I opened it, I was surprised to see my neighbor, Mr. Thompson, standing there. He was a tall man in his late 60s, with silver hair and kind eyes. He lived 2 houses away, and though we had exchanged greetings over the years, our conversations had never gone beyond small talk. He held a small wrapped package in his hands and looked slightly nervous, an unusual expression for him. "Good morning, Linda," he said with a warm but hesitant voice. "I hope I'm not bothering you." "Not at all," I replied with a smile. "What can I do for you, Mr. Thompson?" "Please, call me Henry," he said, returning my smile. I noticed you've been spending a lot of time in your garden. You have quite the green thumb." I chuckled. "Gardening keeps me busy. I find it relaxing." Henry nodded before holding out the package. "I saw this at the farmer's market over the weekend and thought of you. It's nothing much, just a little something to brighten your day." I was taken aback. It had been years since someone had given me an unexpected gift. I carefully took the package, feeling its weight in my hands. "Thank you, Henry. That's very thoughtful of you." He shuffled his feet, looking almost shy. "Well, I'll let you get back to your morning. Have a good day, Linda." "You too," I said, watching as he turned and walked down the path toward the sidewalk. After closing the door, I carefully unwrapped the package. Inside was a beautiful ceramic planter painted with delicate flowers and vines. It was exactly the kind of thing I would have chosen for myself. I ran my fingers over its smooth surface, feeling a strange mix of emotions: gratitude, curiosity, and something else I couldn't quite name. Later that afternoon, I decided to plant a small fern in the planter and place it on my porch. As I worked, I found myself glancing down the street toward Henry's house. I realized I knew very little about him, apart from the fact that he was a widower and had lived on Maplewood Lane just as long as I had. The next day, I baked a batch of oatmeal cookies using my grandmother's recipe and made my way to Henry's house. When he answered the door, he looked pleasantly surprised. "I wanted to thank you for the planter," I said, holding out the plate of cookies. "It was such a thoughtful gift." He smiled warmly, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "You didn't have to do that, but I appreciate it." Then, after a brief pause, he asked, "Would you like to come in for a cup of coffee?" I hesitated for a moment before nodding. I'd like that. Stepping inside, I was immediately struck by how warm and inviting his home was. Bookshelves lined the walls, and a fireplace flickered softly in the living room. We sat at his kitchen table, sipping coffee and talking about everything: gardening, travel, our favorite books. What had started as a simple gesture led to something unexpected, the beginning of a new friendship. I was surprised by how effortlessly conversation flowed between us, how natural it felt to talk to Henry. There was a warmth to his presence, a quiet comfort that made me feel seen in a way I hadn't experienced in years. As I walked home that evening, I couldn't shake the feeling of contentment that had settled in my heart. It wasn't just about the planter or the cookies. It was about the way Henry had noticed me, truly seen me, as more than just the woman who lived 2 doors down. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about the unexpected kindness of my neighbor. It had touched me in a way I hadn't expected. A small gesture, yet it had opened a door to something new, something I hadn't realized I was missing. In the days that followed, everything felt different, as if the world had shifted just slightly, revealing colors I had overlooked before. The rain finally cleared, and sunlight bathed Maplewood Lane in a golden glow. My garden seemed to reflect this change, the flowers blooming brighter, the leaves appearing greener. Or perhaps it was just me, seeing everything through fresh eyes. I found myself thinking about Henry often. Our conversation over coffee had been easy, natural. It wasn't just the words we exchanged. It was the way he listened, truly listened, as if everything I said mattered. I hadn't realized how much I had missed that kind of connection until I felt it again. A few days later, I was in my garden pruning my roses when I heard footsteps approaching. Looking up, I saw Henry walking toward me, his hands tucked into his pockets, a friendly smile on his face. "Good morning, Linda," he greeted, stopping at the edge of my yard. "Those roses are stunning. You've got quite the talent." I wiped my hands on my apron and smiled back. "Thank you, Henry. They're my pride and joy. Would you like to come in for a closer look?" He nodded, and I led him through the gate, pointing out the different varieties, the deep reds, the soft pinks, the creamy whites. He listened intently, asking thoughtful questions and admiring each bloom. "You know," he said after a moment, "I've always wanted a garden like this, but I've never had the patience for it. I admire your dedication." "It's not as hard as it looks," I replied. "It just takes time and a little love." He chuckled. "Well, maybe you could teach me a thing or two." I hesitated briefly before saying, "I'd be happy to. Why don't you come by tomorrow morning and we'll get started?" His eyes brightened. "I'd like that. Thank you, Linda." The next morning, Henry arrived right on time, dressed in old jeans and a flannel shirt. I handed him a pair of gardening gloves and showed him how to prepare the soil for planting. We worked side by side, talking and laughing as we dug, planted, and watered. To my surprise, I found myself genuinely enjoying his company. As days turned into weeks, our gardening sessions became a routine. Sometimes we worked at my house, sometimes at his, tending to whatever needed attention. But it wasn't just about the plants. It was about the conversations, the quiet moments, the growing connection between us. One afternoon, after finishing a row of tulips in his backyard, Henry suggested we take a break. He brought out a pitcher of iced tea, and we sat on his porch, sipping our drinks and watching the birds flutter around. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "I've lived on this street for over 20 years, but I've never really gotten to know my neighbors. I guess I've always been a bit of a loner. I nodded, understanding completely. It's easy to get caught up in your own little world and forget that there are people right next door. He looked at me, his expression soft. I'm glad you moved here, Lena. You've made this place feel like home again. His words touched me deeply, and I felt a lump form in my throat. Thank you, Henry. That means a lot. We sat in comfortable silence, the kind that didn't need to be filled with words. The sun warmed my face. The breeze whispered through the trees, and for the first time in a long while, I felt truly at peace. As time passed, Henry and I grew closer, sharing more than just gardening tips. We talked about our lives, our families, our dreams. I learned that he had been a teacher before retiring, that he loved jazz music, and had a soft spot for old films. He told me about his late wife, Margaret, and how much he missed her. She was the love of my life, he admitted, one evening as we sat on my porch watching the sunset. I never thought I'd find someone who could make me feel that way again. I looked at him, my heart aching for the pain in his voice. I understand. Losing someone you love is never easy. He nodded, his gaze distant. But I think she'd be happy to see me like this, spending time with someone who makes me smile. His words lingered long after he left that night. As I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I thought about Henry and the unexpected friendship we had built. It hadn't been planned or expected, but it had become an important part of my life. As I drifted off to sleep, I found myself wondering where this journey would take us next. Life has a way of testing us, doesn't it? Just when you think you've found your footing, something comes along to shake things up. For Henry and me, that something was a storm, a big one. It was late September, and the weather had been strangely warm for the season. The leaves had just begun to turn, painting the neighborhood in rich shades of gold and red. Henry and I had been spending more time together, not just gardening, but sharing meals, watching movies, even taking short day trips to nearby towns. It felt like we were building something meaningful, something real. Then the storm arrived. It started with a low rumble of thunder, a dark line of clouds stretching across the horizon. By evening, the wind had strengthened, and the rain came down in relentless sheets. I stood at my living room window, watching the trees bend and sway under the force of the wind. The rain pounded against the glass, and then the lights flickered once, twice, before the power went out completely, plunging the house into darkness. I fumbled for a flashlight, lit a few candles, and tried to stay calm. But as the storm raged on, a sense of unease tightened in my chest. Then I heard it, a loud crash, followed by the splintering sound of wood breaking. My heart leaped into my throat. I grabbed my raincoat and flashlight, racing outside as the wind howled around me. Rain lashed against my skin, soaking my clothes within seconds. My heart pounded as I followed the source of the noise toward Henry's house. A massive oak tree in his backyard had been struck by lightning, its trunk split, crashing into the roof of his home. The sight made my stomach drop. "Henry!" I shouted, rushing to his front door. I pounded on it, my pulse racing. "Henry, are you okay?" The door creaked open, revealing him standing there, shaken, but thankfully unharmed. "Linda," he said, his voice tight with worry, "I'm fine, but the tree, it crashed through the roof." I stepped inside, sweeping my flashlight across the room. The damage was worse than I had imagined. The fallen tree had shattered part of his living room, scattering debris everywhere. Rain poured through the broken ceiling, drenching the carpet and furniture. "You can't stay here," I said firmly, grabbing his arm. "It's not safe." He hesitated, glancing around at the mess. "But my house—" "Your house can be repaired," I interrupted. "But you can't spend the night here. You're coming to my place." Henry didn't argue. I helped him gather a few essentials, some clothes, his medications, and a framed photo of Margaret, before we hurried out into the storm. Once inside my home, I handed him a towel and a dry set of clothes. "Go get changed," I said. "I'll make some tea." By the time he returned, dressed in warm clothes, I had a pot of chamomile tea steeping on the stove and a fire crackling in the fireplace. He sank onto the couch, looking exhausted, overwhelmed. "Thank you, Linda," he said quietly. "I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't come." I handed him a mug and sat beside him. "You don't have to thank me. That's what friends are for." We sat in silence, listening to the storm outside. The power was still out, but the candles cast a soft, flickering glow, making the room feel comforting despite the chaos beyond the windows. "You know," Henry said after a while, "this reminds me of a night I spent with Margaret during a hurricane. We were young, newly married, and didn't have much, but we had each other. And that was enough." I smiled, feeling a lump rise in my throat. "She sounds like an incredible woman." "She was," he murmured, his voice soft. Then, after a moment, he added, "And you remind me of her in so many ways." His words took me by surprise, sending warmth through my chest. I opened my mouth to speak, but he reached over, taking my hand in his, the gesture firm, steady. "Linda," he said, his voice gentle yet unwavering. "I know this might not be the best time, but I need to say it. The past few months with you have meant more to me than I can put into words. You've brought light back into my life, and I don't want to let that go." I looked into his eyes, seeing the sincerity, the vulnerability. My heart pounded, not in fear or uncertainty, but in hope. "Henry," I whispered, squeezing his hand, "you've brought light into my life, too. I didn't realize how much I needed someone like you until you came along." A slow, warm smile spread across his face, filling the space between us with something unspoken yet deeply understood. "Then maybe," he said, "we can figure this out together." I nodded, feeling a quiet peace settle over me. Together. The storm continued to rage outside, but in that moment, it no longer mattered. Inside, it felt as if the sun had come out. We stayed up late talking, our fingers intertwined, until the rain finally stopped and dawn's first golden light spilled through the windows. The morning after the storm was crisp and clear, the kind of day that makes you believe in fresh starts. The air smelled of damp earth and fallen leaves, and the sunlight streaming through my kitchen window felt like a promise. Henry and I sat at the table, sipping coffee and eating toast with jam, the events of the previous night still fresh in our minds. "I should call the insurance company," Henry said, breaking the comfortable silence. "And maybe a contractor to take a look at the damage." I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "We'll figure it out, one step at a time." He smiled, his eyes filled with gratitude. "I don't know what I'd do without you, Linda." "You don't have to find out," I replied with a soft smile. Over the next few days, we worked together to get Henry's home back in order. The insurance adjuster assessed the damage, and a contractor began repairs on the roof. It was exhausting work, but strangely fulfilling, something real, something that brought us even closer. One evening, after sorting through some of Henry's damaged belongings, we sat on my porch, watching the sunset over Maplewood Lane. The sky was awash with stunning hues, pinks, oranges, deep purples, all blending into one breathtaking masterpiece. "You know," Henry said, his voice thoughtful, "I've been thinking a lot about what you said the other night, about figuring this out together." I turned to him, my heart skipping a beat. He took a deep breath, his expression serious but hopeful. "I don't want to waste any more time, Linda. Life's too short, and I've spent too much of it alone. I want to be with you, if you'll have me." Tears welled in my eyes, but I blinked them away, wanting to see him clearly. Every single moment of this. "Henry," I whispered. "I feel the same way," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "I've been alone for so long, and I didn't realize how much I needed someone like you until you came into my life." Henry reached over and took my hand, his grip warm and steady. "Then let's do this," he said with quiet certainty. "Let's build a life together, whatever that looks like." I nodded, feeling a deep peace settle within me, a happiness I hadn't felt in years. Together. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of emotions and decisions. Henry's house was repaired, but he spent more and more time at mine, until it felt as though we were already living together. We spoke about the future, about blending our lives, about traveling, about growing old side by side. It was thrilling, terrifying, and wonderful all at once. One crisp October morning, we decided to take a walk through the neighborhood, enjoying the fiery autumn colors and the cool, fresh air. The leaves crunched beneath our feet as we strolled hand in hand, a quiet sense of contentment settling between us. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had truly found my place in the world. "You know," Henry said, as we paused near a striking maple tree, its red leaves ablaze in the morning light, "I think Margaret would have liked you." I turned to him, surprised. "Really?" He nodded, his eyes softened by memory. "She always said I needed someone who could keep me on my toes, someone with a kind heart and a strong spirit." He looked at me, his gaze steady and full of meaning. "That's you, Linda." Tears welled in my eyes again, but this time I didn't blink them away. "Thank you, Henry," I said, my voice trembling. "That means more to me than you know." He stopped walking and turned to face me fully, taking both of my hands in his. "Linda," he said slowly, his voice filled with quiet determination, "I know we're not young anymore, but I believe we still have a lot of good years ahead of us, and I want to spend every single one of them with you." I smiled through the tears that streaked my cheeks, a joy so deep it almost hurt. "I want that too, Henry, more than anything." He leaned in then, pressing a gentle, tender kiss to my lips, a kiss that felt like a promise. And in that moment, surrounded by the beauty of the season and the warmth of his love, I knew without a doubt this was just the beginning of something wonderful. As we continued our walk, sunlight filtering through golden leaves and the crisp air carrying the scent of autumn, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for Henry, for the life we were building together, and for the unexpected kindness that had brought us to this very moment. Life had thrown us a few storms, but we had weathered them, and we had come out stronger on the other side. And as I looked ahead to the future, I knew with absolute certainty that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, because sometimes the most beautiful things in life appear when you least expect them.